Hi everyone, Yuvar here from VPMA. In this quick video, we're going to create and run a database job in Control-M. Before we do that, we want to make sure we have the Control-M for Databases plugin installed on an agent that has access to whichever database that we are trying to connect to. And two, we need to create connection profiles for our database jobs in Control-M. Connection profiles can contain your database details and credentials. That way they're not stored in your database job definitions. So first, let's get started with building our connection profile. We want to navigate over to Configuration, Centralized Connection Profiles, click on Add Connection Profile, select Databases, and this right-hand pop-up is where we build our connection profile for our databases plugin. So we can enter a name. For me, I'll just go ahead and call it testDB. And below, we can select the database type that we're trying to connect to. So we can see all of the different options that are available. For me, I'm going to be connecting to a MS SQL database. Select your database version. And below it, we have the database connection parameters. So here, if we're using SSL to encrypt the connection to the MS SQL database, we can turn on the SSL toggle, and if not, we can leave it as is. Right below it, we need to enter the hostname of our specified database. This connection profile will by default use port 1433, but if we need to use a different port to connect to the database, then we can use the use port option to specify whichever port we need to use. Below, we can enter any additional parameters, and we also have the use JDBC toggle, which is turned on by default. We can turn this off and use JTDS as well. Below, we need to enter our database name. So for me, it's going to be testDB. And below, we need to specify our authentication method. So we have SQL Server authentication, and we also have Windows and NTLM2 authentication. So here we need to define the username and password of the specified database. And finally, we have the advanced connection profile configuration, which we don't necessarily need to get into for this video. And we also have the SSIS tab, which allows us to skip SSIS package validation in case we need to, and also add any SSIS packages. At this point, with all of our database credentials entered, we can test our connection profile to make sure we're able to establish a connection to the database. Click on Test. Select the agent that you have your Control-M for Databases plugin installed on. Test. And it should say the connection to the selected agent validated successfully. Now we can go back to the Control-M planning domain to create and run our database job. So now back in the Control-M planning domain, I already have a database job loaded in my folder, but in case you don't have one, you can just add it from the job palette here. So going to my job definition, we can give our database job a name. So we'll call it testDB, or Control-M agent with the Control-M for Databases plugin installed. Next, we need to select the connection profile that we just built. Next, we need to select our execution type. So we can go with stored procedure, SQL script. We can embed a query, we can run SSIS packages, or even MS SQL agent jobs. With the stored procedure selected, we can select our schema. Next, we can select our stored procedure. And here we can see all of the parameters of the stored procedures with the option to add different values. Now going into more options, here we can enable auto commit, which basically determines whether to commit statements that complete successfully to the database. We can append execution log to the job output, and this by default is turned on, and this determines whether to show the execution log in the output that is generated by the job. And finally, we have append SQL output to job output, which determines whether to show the SQL output in the output that is generated by the job itself. So now we can check in and our database job is ready to run. Now with our job selected, we can click on run selected workspace. Now let's navigate over to the monitoring domain to watch this job run. So here we have the job. Let's go ahead and free and run it. And now as we can see, our control M for databases job ran successfully, triggering a stored procedure. Here on the right hand side, we can look at the different job settings, we can look at the logs, and we can also review the output of the job. Thanks for watching.